Meanwhile, in the NBA, we got our first look at Karl-Anthony Towns in a New York Knicks uniform. He was getting shots up at the team's practice facility. You can see him right there. The trade, which sent Cat to the Knicks, Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo to the Minnesota Timberwolves, it was finalized on Wednesday afternoon. Here was Cat's reaction to this trade.
Shocked. More of the word flabbergasted would be more correct, but just shocked. We got great players, and we continue to put the work in, day out. Be the best versions of ourselves. We compete every single day. We do a lot of things. We've done something special there last year, and JB's been building something special here. So this is our home. We're just here to, like I said, amplify them and be the best team there can be.
Two guys with great nicknames joining me now. Worldwide Windy, Bobby Money Moves here. I'm going to start with you, Brian Windhorst. How do you assess Cat's fit with the New York Knicks?
Well, when you look at the ability to add an all-star caliber player, an all-NBA type player right at the beginning of the season to a team that was a threat to win the East last year, I mean, this is the kind of move that really the Knicks have been looking for years. They turned out to develop their own superstar with Jalen Brunson, and this is sort of the complementary superstar. This is what you need in the NBA, two high-talent players who can play together. Karl Towns and Jalen Brunson can play together. They have an excellent set of complementary players. There is no reason to not have sky-high expectations for the Knicks. They paid dearly for this trade. They've spent a lot in assets over the summer. They have some depth concerns as a result of these trades, but this is the most talented Knicks roster we have seen in 2 decades, and Karl Towns is definitely injected a lot of excitement to that team.
Well, I've been on record. I've said I love this starting five. I think it's as good. It is probably the best starting five in the NBA right now before we start playing. But there's always a but to something here. I'm going to put a little bit of cold water. I'm not in favor of their depth. Certainly when you lose Dante DiVincenzo and they have their guard lineup of Cameron Payne and Tyler Kolek and Deuce McBride, that's not really my concern. The concern for me, and this is even if the trade didn't happen, was with their front court. They are awfully thin, certainly with the Mitchell Robinson injury. When you look at Precious Achiuwa and Jericho Sims, those are really 2 your front courts. And here's the other thing. What the trade did was it left them 2 roster spots short. They have to get to 14 with $3.6 million to be able to fill that here. So it's not like help is on the way here. So if there is an Achilles heel to this Knicks roster during the season here, it's the depth and as far as the inability to add another player.
When you say that, though, it makes me think about these Tom Thibodeau teams, Windy, where we see Tibbs, he loves to run up the minutes of his guys. Do you think that's going to be the case if you share the concerns Bobby does about depth?
Well, specifically because some of these Knicks guys have had some injury concerns. OG Anunoby and Karl Towns have had injury concerns in recent years. I will say this. While their depth at big man is an issue, Mitchell Robinson is expected to come back at some point this season. It's going to be a few months, but he is still on the roster. He is a starter quality player, so they are potentially going to have a starter quality backup on that team to come. The second thing is, this was a bet on Karl Towns, no doubt, but it was a smaller bet on Miles McBride. They believe that he can step up and handle a bigger load. He shot 41% from three-point range last year. They need someone to fill all of those shots that Dante DiVincenzo is leaving with his trade. I think Miles McBride will step up and play a bigger role for them as well.
Well, the interesting thing here is that I remember last year at the same time, the big question when we were talking about Boston, who eventually won the NBA championship, did they have enough depth? And we weren't talking about Sam Hauser or Peyton Pritchard or, certainly we know we're going to get with Al Horford. So for New York to certainly take that next step, and if there is an injury, they're going to have to rely on certainly Deuce McBride. We saw him in the playoffs here. Landry Shamet, certainly a name to keep an eye on for some shooting here. So although there's a concern now, let's maybe see how this develops during the regular season.
Right, you're saying let's not make all of our judgments here in the early goings of October. Let's let them play a couple of games before we fully decide what we think about this New York Knicks roster. In the pack, we aren't the only ones who wanted to see Minnesota's new stars and their new threads. Look at that, new photographer in Minneapolis as well. Rudy Gobert wanted to make sure to get the snapshot just right of his new teammates, Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo. And then on Wednesday afternoon, the trade that brought this trio into the Twin Cities sent Karl-Anthony Towns, of course, to New York. It was finalized. And earlier today, we heard from Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo as they were formally introduced as Minnesota Timberwolves. Here's their reactions to being traded.
Yeah, it was a lot of emotion. You know, you spend a certain amount of time in a place, New York, you know, going there 5 years ago and, you know, having a goal in mind, you know, to accomplish a lot of great things and, you know, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears put into, you know, that organization and uniform.
When you look at the big picture, my mind wasn't on, you know, what teams are interested in me when I was in New York. I was fully there. I wanted to be there. You know, once I realized that this is a, you know, real thing and actually happening, my mind kind of transitioned to Minnesota, and I'm 100% here, and I'm super excited.
My wife was actually saying that it could be a lot worse, for sure. You know, I'm not going to throw any shots out here, but yeah, it could be worse, you know. And like I said, I'm a basketball player, and I want to win. You know, at this point in my career, I've accomplished a lot of great things on the individual level, but I want to win a championship, and you know, this is a perfect opportunity to do that. You know, that's what matters. Winning matters the most.
Yeah, it could have been worse. It could have been the other side of the bridge. But anyway, we love Kendra Randle taking the glass half full approach there. Brian Windhorst, how does Julius fit with this team?
You know, Malika, I was kind of surprised over the last week at how many executives I talked to who felt like the Timberwolves won this trade, which is not something that you would expect to hear when, you know, most people would agree the best player in the trade went to the Knicks. But I think what they are reacting to is that the way the Wolves were able to rebalance their roster in this trade, get Julius Randle, get DiVincenzo, who helps them off the bench, give Rob Dillingham, their lottery pick, some time where he's not maybe needed as much out of the gate with this, and also reduce their long-term payroll for a guy in Karl Towns who had a really big contract. And so the big thing will be, what is Julius Randle's role playing alongside Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert, and is he a long-term fit there? Does he sign an extension later this year? Does he pick up his player option? But I think a lot of people feel like the Wolves improved themselves short and medium term in this deal.
Well, they did improve. And you know what? I'm expecting to see a lot of Naz Reid and Julius Randle play at that 4 or 5, right? And, you know, I think Julius Randle is going to have to make that shift of being comfortable with playing the center position at times. And he could do it, right? Because he's a guy that could roll to the basket. And you got a guy like Naz Reid who could stretch the floor. He could do a lot of things. I honestly believe Rudy Gobert is going to be the odd man out. I'm not saying he's not going to be in the starting lineup, but what I'm saying is when it matters the most in finishing games, if I'm the coach, I'm going with Julius Randle and Naz Reid to close my game. One thing about Julius Randle, one thing that we cannot knock, every situation he's been in, he's produced and put up numbers. He always shows up to work. He's reliable. You could count on him playing hard and competing on both ends. And I think that's a perfect thing when you go and play with a guy like Anthony Edwards, who doesn't believe in taking nights off or even taking possessions off.
I just want to underscore, Brian, you said that the Timberwolves, you're hearing from a lot of executives, won this trade. And I know a lot of the focus is rightfully on Julius Randle and what he brings. But, Bobby, you're maybe looking elsewhere for why folks feel so good about this?
Oh, I do, and I agree with Brian. I've talked to 2 teams this morning, and they confirmed that same sentiment. But the one player that we haven't talked about as much is Donte DiVincenzo, who led the Knicks last year in three-point percentage, broke the team record here. This Minnesota team going into preseason, there was 2 concerns as far as the roles of Rob Dillingham and certainly Terrence Shannon, their first-round picks this year, how those 2 players would step up here. And now when you add Donte DiVincenzo to Nickeil Alexander-Walker to Naz Reid, you have 3 starting-level players that can come off your bench for Minnesota right now.
Wendy, last word on this.
Yeah, I think a big factor for Minnesota is going to be where do they get their where do they get the 3-point shooting? Because 3-point shooting is very important. Karl Towns was a huge guy in the 3-point shooting because Rudy Gobert doesn't shoot them. They get a guy in DiVincenzo who, as Bobby pointed out, is a high volume 3-point shooter. So where do they get that 3-point shooting in their starting lineup? Let's see what Chris Finch has designed to try to cover up that huge hole that Cat's offense is leaving there.
You brought up Cat, so let's get to him and the other side of this trade because we got our first glimpse of him in a non-photoshopped version of a Knicks uniform today. You can see him here in Charlotte getting some shots up. That's where the team is holding training camp. And just 2 hours ago, Towns, he talked about reuniting with a very familiar face.
With Tibbs, I learned a lot, and he helped me in my career forward. So just building great habits, staying disciplined, putting in work, something that I think all y'all know he's all about. So just continuing to take that approach every single day. I think it gives us a little bit of a head start. You know, I know the offense that he runs, I know the way he likes to play defense, and I know what he expects from his players.
Karl-Anthony Towns, he's the self-proclaimed best shooting big man ever. And while that turned some heads because we've all seen, Dirk play, the numbers, they make a good case for Cat. Since coming into the league, the only 7-footer with more 3-pointers is Lauri Markkanen.
I'm Kendrick Perkins, better known as Big Perk, and nothing gets past me. Freeze! Just when you thought it did get past me, there I am. I spy a problem. I spy it all. Carry the hell on.
That's right. No sunshades today. Damn it, reading glasses, because I do spy a problem. That problem is Karl-Anthony Towns going to the New York Knicks, who's going to be a problem for not only the teams in the Eastern Conference, but the rest of the league. And I know we talk about, Cat and his ability to stretch the floor, but you know what else he's great at? Putting the ball on the floor. Look at this roll and replace. Usually when Cat come up, he's open for the 3, but because he's a great 3-point shooter, his defender is locking and trailing, and he does a great job of getting downhill. He'll go Karl-Anthony Towns again, running to this sweet spot. He's such a great shooter. Look at the closeout, and Cat knows this. 7 foot, 265 pounds, and snatching the screws out the rim. This is what New York is getting, not just shooting. One of the most skilled bigs in the game today in Karl-Anthony Towns, and I spy a problem for the rest of the league.
So that's what we spy on the court, as Perk would say, carry on. You covered Karl day in and day out since his rookie season. And right before he was traded, you got a very special and very personal glimpse into what Karl means to the community. Can you tell us a little bit more about what happened?
Yeah, sure, Malika. The news breaks on Friday night that he's traded to New York, and immediately as I'm working the story, the one thing that I'm thinking about is, what am I going to tell Nita? And Nita is my 9-year-old daughter. She is an enormous Karl-Anthony Towns fan. Her brother, Owen, is also a big Towns fan. Over the years, they've had chances to meet him briefly, say hello to him. Karl once gave them both headbands when they were young. And so that made sure in Nita's eyes that they were best friends going forward. And so late that night, on the night of the trade, I got a text from Karl-Anthony Towns, who knows that these kids really look up to him. And he said, hey, how's the family doing? And I said, Karl, not going to lie to you, Nita cried herself to sleep. She's very upset by it. And he said, where are they going to be tomorrow? Do they have any sports? And I just was thinking, well, yes, Nita has a soccer tournament on Saturday, and here's where it is. You can come. And I thought, no way is he going to show up with all of the things that are happening. His life has just been turned upside down. He's got to leave the next day for New York. Lo and behold, he shows up about halftime of the game, watches the game, takes pictures with everyone that asked of him.
Wow.
After the game, pulls Nita aside, gives her a big hug, gives her some whispers of encouragement, and just spent a little time with 2 kids who needed to say goodbye to him. And it was just a really emotional moment. And I think that Karl also probably felt some love there as well, a little bit of a goodbye after 9 years in Minnesota.
just to think, John, after just a couple hours after finding out this life-altering news, he decided to stop by a children's soccer tournament to be able to say goodbye. I think that says a whole lot about Karl-Anthony Towns, and I think it says a whole lot about your coverage, your fairness to someone over a long period of time. So, John, thank you so much for sharing that story and for stopping by NBA Today.
Thanks, Malika.
Jimmy with the heat, I'm on fire. It's NBA over here,